It was a cold, foggy evening in London when the famous detective, Mr. Arthur Whitlock, received an urgent message. The note was from Inspector Harold Graves, a trusted friend and a seasoned officer of Scotland Yard. It read, "Whitlock, your assistance is needed immediately. A mysterious death has occurred at the residence of Sir Edward and Lady Margaret Blackwood. The case is baffling, and your expertise is required. Come at once." Without wasting a moment, Whitlock grabbed his coat and hat and hurried to the Blackwood mansion. The grand house stood ominously in the dim light, its windows glowing faintly through the thick fog. Inspector Graves greeted him at the door, his face pale and troubled. "Thank you for coming, Whitlock. This is a most peculiar case," Graves said, leading him inside. The scene was set in the luxurious drawing room. Lady Margaret Blackwood lay lifeless on the sofa, her face frozen in an expression of agony. On the table beside her was an open box of expensive chocolates, half-eaten. Sir Edward, a wealthy businessman, sat in a chair nearby, his face buried in his hands. "What happened here?" Whitlock asked, his sharp eyes scanning the room. Inspector Graves explained. "Lady Blackwood received this box of chocolates as a gift earlier today. She shared a few with her husband, but he didn't eat many. Shortly after, she collapsed and died. The doctor confirmed it was poison." Whitlock picked up the box of chocolates and examined it carefully. It was a high-quality brand, wrapped in elegant packaging. There was no note or card to indicate who had sent it. "Who sent these chocolates?" Whitlock asked Sir Edward. The man looked up, his eyes red with grief. "I don't know. They arrived this morning with no name attached. Margaret loved chocolates, so she didn't think twice about eating them." Whitlock turned to Inspector Graves. "Have you questioned the staff?" "Yes," Graves replied. "No one saw who delivered the box. It was left at the doorstep." Whitlock's mind raced. This was no ordinary murder. The killer had gone to great lengths to remain anonymous. He decided to investigate further. The investigation begins. Whitlock began by examining the chocolates. He noticed that only certain ones had been tampered with. The poisoned chocolates were all from the top layer, and they were of the same flavored dark chocolate with hazelnut filling. "The killer knew Lady Blackwood's preferences," Whitlock muttered. "They specifically targeted her." Next, he questioned Sir Edward about any enemies or recent disputes. Sir Edward admitted that his business dealings had made him a few rivals, but he couldn't think of anyone who would go to such extremes. "What about Lady Blackwood? Did she have any enemies?" Whitlock asked. Sir Edward hesitated. "Margaret was a kind woman, but she did have a falling out with her younger sister, Clara, a few months ago. They haven't spoken since." Whitlock made a mental note to speak with Clara. He also learned that Lady Blackwood had recently changed her will, leaving a significant portion of her fortune to a charity. This information raised suspicions. The suspects. Whitlock and Graves compiled a list of suspects. Claire Blackwood, Lady Blackwood's estranged sister, who stood to inherit nothing under the new will. James Whittaker, Sir Edward's business rival, who had recently lost a lucrative deal to him. Mrs. Harriet Lane, Lady Blackwood's close friend, who had been seen arguing with her a week before her death. The chocolatier, the owner of the luxury chocolate brand, who might have been paid to poison the chocolates. Whitlock decided to interview each suspect. Claire Blackwood. Claire lived in a modest apartment on the outskirts of London. When Whitlock and Graves arrived, she seemed nervous but cooperative. "I had nothing to do with Margaret's death," Claire insisted. "Yes, we had a fight, but I would never harm her." Whitlock noticed a box of the same chocolates on her table. "Do you often buy these?" he asked. Clara shook her head. "No, they were a gift from an admirer. I haven't eaten any." Whitlock found this suspicious but decided to investigate further. James Whittaker. James Whittaker was a shrewd businessman with a reputation for being ruthless. When questioned, he denied any involvement. "I may not like Sir Edward, but I'm not a murderer," he said. Whitlock noticed a receipt on Whittaker's desk for a large sum of money paid to the chocolatier. When confronted, Whittaker claimed it was for a business dinner. Mrs. Harriet Lane. Mrs. Lane was a wealthy socialite and a close friend of Lady Blackwood. She admitted to their argument, but claimed it was over a trivial matter. "Margaret was like a sister to me. I would never hurt her," she said tearfully. Whitlock found no evidence linking her to the crime. The chocolatier. The chocolatier, Monsieur Pierre, was a Frenchman known for his exquisite creations. He was shocked to hear about the poisoning. "I would never tarnish my reputation by selling poisoned chocolates," he exclaimed. Whitlock discovered that the box in question had been specially ordered and paid for in cash. The buyer had left no name. The breakthrough. Whitlock returned to the Blackwood mansion to re-examine the scene. He noticed something odd, a faint smell of almonds in the drawing room. He recalled that cyanide, a deadly poison, often smells like almonds. He also found a small, crumpled piece of paper in the wastebasket. It was a receipt for a purchase of cyanide, made under a false name. Whitlock Cross referenced the handwriting with samples from the suspects. It matched Clara Blackwood's. The confession. Confronted with the evidence, Claire broke down and confessed. "I didn't mean to kill her," she sobbed. "I only wanted to scare her. I was angry about the will. I thought if she got sick, she might change it back." Whitlock shook his head. "You went too far, Clara. Poison is not a tool for scaring someone." The conclusion: Claire Blackwood was arrested and charged with murder. The case of the poisoned chocolates was solved, but it left a bitter taste in everyone's mouth. As Whitlock walked away from the Blackwood mansion, he couldn't help but reflect on the dark side of human nature. Even in the most elegant settings, greed and jealousy could lead to tragedy. And so, the great detective returned to his quiet life, ready for the next mystery that would come his way.